Okay, we're now going to look at the client and policy management. Lesson 5. A number of objectives we're going to cover in this lesson. We're going to look at describing the SEPM and client communications, administering clients, configuring the groups and locations, Active Directory integration with SEP, client configuration modes, configuring domains, and general tamper protection. Let's have a look at the communications first. The communications between the SEPM and the clients are managed by a heartbeat. The heartbeat from the SEPM is initiated by the client to the SEPM. And we're using the Apache Tomcat server and the HTTP server to transfer certain information like the policies and the patches and the content updates. When you configure the communication settings for the clients, you can choose to have them in push or pull mode. The push mode is the default and has a constant connection to the SEPM. But this is quite high on resources, so once you have a number of clients communicating with the SEPM in push mode, if that's too much for the SEPM, you can then change them to be in pull mode, where they're connected based on the heartbeat interval. Here we can see on the client's page, once we've chosen the group, we've selected my company in this case, we can choose the Policies tab on the right-hand side and number 4, Communication Settings. Under there we need to specify the Management Server List. The Management Server List is the list of servers that this particular client can communicate with. Number 6, we need to specify the download. Do we wish to download policies and content from the management server? And there we specify the push or the pull mode. On step 7, we can decide whether or not we're going to upload information from the clients up to the management server about the applications that are running on that client. On step 8, that's where we specify the heartbeat interval. On step 9, we can specify the download randomization. That enables the parameters that the scheduled time on which they perform the download. And the number 10, reconnection preferences, what to do if you need to reconnect. Here we can see an example of the Sylink.xml file. This is the file that stores a lot of those communication settings. You can vaguely work out what the settings are saying, but the numbers or variables that are set are specific to the Sylink.xml file and are read by the SEPM manager. This is only a section of it. It's not recommended to edit this file, as that could cause communication problems with the clients and the SEPM. So, administering clients now. Here we can see the client interface. We can see in the central area that the client is showing it's fully protected with the green tick. No problems detected. Underneath that area, we can specify the different protection areas, like the virus and spyware, or proactive threat, or network threat. And on the right-hand side of that, we can specify certain options to tailor those. This is where you would see the definition dates of the particular content downloaded to this particular client. On the bottom, we can see that system tray icon, the yellow shield indicating that the SEP client is installed, and the green dot indicating that it's currently communicating with the SEPM. It's possible to change the user interface settings. You do this from the SEPM manager underneath the policies section. We can choose the location-specific settings and client user interface control settings. Here we can see it's currently set to server controlled. On the right-hand side, step 3, we can see we have options on that type of control. The server control means that all of the policies and control is done by the SEPM manager. If you were to choose client control, it means that the client, the primary user working on that endpoint, could manage the actual settings themselves. If you choose mixed control, the administrator that's running on the SEPM can choose which options are on server or client control. Also notice in step 4, you've got the ability to change the padlock settings in a lot of these configurations. Notice when it's locked, it means that that user at the endpoint will not be able to change the setting that's been set up. Here we can see on the user interface control settings, we've specified server control, and this is where we can customize it. We can choose whether or not they wish to display the client or display the notification area icon. You can make changes to the network threat protection, proactive threat protection, and the security event notification here as well. Under mixed control, this is where we customize whether or not they're under server or client control. So we can see the feature in the central area, and on the right-hand side we've got the server or client button. We've selected server as being the choice under most circumstances, and that's the most secure option. But we can also see we've chosen the client user interface show hide notification area icon has been put under client control, which means the primary user on that particular computer could choose to hide the notification area icon if they wish. We can view certain client information. Here we can select the client from the Clients page, and we can edit the properties. We can look at the general settings on the right-hand side and see the type of processor or memory that that particular client is running. We can also see the unique ID. The unique ID is the specific ID that the SEPM manager is recognizing this client. On the Network tab, we can see the DNS servers that this particular client is connecting and also the IP addresses. On the Clients tab, for the client information, we can see details about the definitions and signatures. We can see the download protection definition details and also the last check-in time. That's the last time that particular endpoint checked in with the SEPM manager. On the user info, we have gathered information about the primary user working on this computer. As a security administrator, it's very useful to gather user information, just in case they need to contact the user on a particular client system. So when you're installing the client, you can request user information. So here we're doing that. We've said, yes, we wish to collect the user information, and we've selected a pop-up message for the user to actually read. And here we can add in the particular fields of information that we wish to gather from them. Notice some of them are optional. If we've ticked the box, it means the user doesn't have to add anything in there. And this is how it appears to the client once they've started running it. So the message specified when the setting the user information is displayed at the top, and then the required information, the mandatory ones, are highlighted by the red star. Note that this information is not qualified at all. We don't know what they're putting in, it's just added into the database for reference purposes. We can set up certain client scans. We can choose a scheduled scan, which is defined in the policy. We can use on-demand active scans, which is affecting or checking certain common affected areas. We can do an on-demand full scan, which will do the entire system and can take quite a while. And we can do on-demand custom scans, which are specified again by the policy settings. So here we can see running an on-demand scan. We've chosen the Clients tab and we've selected the clients from the list below, and we can force to run the command on the computer selected. And in this case, we've chosen scan. And then it will ask you what type of scan you wish to run. And here we're seeing active scan as being the option chosen. So let's have a look at configuring groups now. Here we can see the group structure with my company at the top and the default group below. And we've created a Europe and North America group with some subgroups underneath Europe. We can now see with the policy icon of the scroll the inheritance that have been set up for this particular structure. Notice the inheritance for engineering has been turned off before the unique policy was applied to the engineering group. So what effectively will happen is if a policy is applied to my company at the top level, it will filter down and apply to default group, Europe, North America and sales, but not the engineering group. It will not change any of the current policies that are applied to engineering. When creating the group types, there's a number of different ways you can approach this. You could use the role-based, which is specific to maybe departmental, so IT, management, marketing, sales, etc. Or you could use the geographic, as in North America, Europe, Asia, in that way. You could also include functional, as in laptops, desktops, servers. A lot of these are used in conjunction with each other and create a hybrid structure. It's simple enough to move clients between groups. For instance, if we had a client currently in the Americas sales division and that particular user was relocating to Europe sales, we could very easily within the SEPM manager pick up that client and drop it into the Europe sales group. What will happen the next time that particular client communicates with the SEPM is it will pick up the policies that have been applied to the Europe sales group. You can have shared and non-shared policies applied to groups. Shared means that that particular policy is applied to a number of groups, whereas non-shared is specific to only that one group. The shared policies are accessed from the policies page, whereas the non-shared policies can be accessed by the clients page. In this structure, we can see the example core, Europe and sales have got a shared policy applied, whereas the North America sales structure have a non-shared policy. Let's have a look at locations now. Here we can see our group structure again, and we've now added underneath our Europe sales group 2 locations, a remote and an office location. This is very typical for laptop users because they tend to be far more mobile than any other types. So this laptop user could be working in the Europe sales offices where they're physically located in an office, maybe connected by an Ethernet, maybe connecting with the SEPM manager frequently. And that criteria will then designate them to be in the sales office and apply that set of policies. Now, if that user then picks up their laptop and takes it to a hotel or a Starbucks, for instance, the criteria will change. They're no longer connected by Ethernet, they're no longer certain criteria being fulfilled, and that will then designate the SEP client to switch to another location, and in this case, remote. You must always have one default location. There must always be one location there. And in this case, the remote one is the one that's been specified. So the default location would be used if location awareness is used and no locations meet the current criteria. Criteria could be IP address range, it could be connecting with a certain SEPM or DNS, or some sort of network connection. It would also be used if the location is changed or renamed and that location obviously no longer exists. The other recommendation is the default location should be the most restrictive. In other words, the most restrictive policies should be applied to the default location. And as I say, initially the SEPM creates the default as the only location, and the administrator can add others as they require. Here we can see the office and a VPN location being created. So typical locations would be office, VPN, and remote. The office and VPN would have very specific criteria that need to be fulfilled, and the remote or default location will probably have very limited criteria and would be the most restrictive policies applied. It's recommended to add the locations after you configure all your group structure. So the location awareness decision logic. So here we have at the top, due to a change or polling interval, maybe a location awareness is started. What it will check is, are the conditions still current or location still true? If it is, then there will be no location change. If something has changed, it will then say how many locations match the current criteria. If only one location matches, then that location will change to it. If 0 locations match, it will then follow the 0 route and check if no criteria has been defined, in which case there may well be no location change. If you have 2 or more locations that match the current criteria, it will change it to the default. If we look at the 0 locations that match that current criteria, it could well be it will change the default also if there's more than one exist. So what about planning locations? We need to think about the different physical locations that will affect the policies or the security that need to be controlled. So where are the locations? Which users are connecting from where? Is location awareness required at all? For servers and desktops, they don't tend to move around, so therefore they may well only need the one default location of Office. Which network connections are used? Could be Ethernet, could be wireless. Which applications or services are allowed, and do they need to change depending on whether or not you're running from the office or remote? And what type of control is to be used? It could be that when the location changes to be remote, it may well be they become under client control. So defining the location conditions. We can add the location wizard that can specify the criteria. It could be any one of those in the first box on the left, no specified condition, IP change, DNS server address, etc. And there are lots of other conditions available for network, SSID, DHCP connection, etc. So how do we define a location? Well, first of all, the top box, we're looking at criteria with the AND relationship. So we're saying switch to this location when condition 1 and condition 2 and condition 3 are all true. So we have an IP address range that needs to be complied with. We need to be connecting with one of those 2 DNS servers, and we need to be connected using the Ethernet. If all of those are true, then we'll change to that location. We can also use the OR relationship. So we've got condition 1 in the box below, with any one of those VPNs could be true, in which case choose that location. So how do we add and modify locations? Well, from the clients page, we need to select the group, and we need to choose the Policies tab. We can choose the Add Location underneath the tasks. Once we've selected the location, we can then go in and edit it. Here we can see we've highlighted the Office location, and we can see the conditions below when that Office location is true. We can add more conditions. We could also set that location to be the default. It isn't currently, as the remote is the default. You can only have one default location in each group. So here we have some locations that can be added. We have the Office, the VPN, and the remote, and these are very common locations. It's, again, more restrictive security policies. The remote location is the recommendation. So a little bit about deleting groups locations. You can delete groups locations, but you must leave at least one there, and that last one must be specified as the default location. Active Directory integration with SEP. A directory is a hierarchical organization, and it's defined by those nested containers called those OUs, and they're the ones we can link in to the group structure. The directory contains objects that describe certain areas and objects within the database. Within SEP, we're only interested in the computers or users. So what is relevant to the SEP? Well, the SEPM can import the OU, the user objects, and the computer objects. It does not import any security objects. But it can also use the authentication for the users. So here we can see an Active Directory structure on the left and the SEPM structure on the right. So Active Directory groups are not associations and aren't containers, whereas the SEPM groups are organized containers. Once we've set up our OU structure, we could synchronize that across to our SEPM environment. And that will create one or more nested SEPM groups. You can synchronize these by a schedule or run it manually. So here we can see an example Active Directory structure on the left-hand side and the SEPM structure it will create on the right-hand side. You can do multiple branches from the same server, but only one at a time. So the steps that we have to follow when we're working with Active Directory integration is we need to add those directory servers first and specify the synchronization schedule. We need to import the directory structures, configure the policy inheritance, define the policies for groups with inheritance turned off, and deploy and update those clients that are present in the Active Directory. So the first step we need to do is add in that directory server to the SEPM. We do that from the admin page under the servers section. We highlight our SEPM and we can do edit server properties. And underneath the directory servers tab, we add in our directory server to synchronize with. We need to specify the name, what type, and the IP address. Now we can go across to our clients page, specify our group, and specify to import organizational unit or container that we wish to fulfill below that specified group. So here we've chosen my company, and we're going to import the core highlighted in step 4 into that subgroup structure. So configuring the synchronization now, we can do this from the directory servers page where we specify to synchronize and how often we wish to do it underneath the schedule. And that frequency can be customized. We can also do this manually under the clients page, specifying the core subgroup and sync now task. Let's have a look at the client configuration modes now. So we mentioned you have user mode and computer mode. They say computer mode is regarded as the best method to manage your endpoints, as all the whole computer is protected. It is the default mode, and it's, as I say, recommended. The user mode will then mean that it applies to the particular user, and it will policy change when that user changes. It is more network intensive, as it needs to be checking with the SEPM on regular intervals for the user that's logged in. Let's have a look at configuring domains. A quick review on the site. Remember, the site is all about the database. The site name and the database is related directly. And we have a number of remote sites, and the local site in this case is Europe. And that's the SEPM that you're currently connecting into. We have the Symantec Endpoint Protection default domain, the one domain that's created when we install. But it may well be you may wish to create other domains within the same database. It isn't normal. It's quite often that you only have one domain, and it makes life much easier for the administrator just to have the one. But if you believe it necessary in your environment to keep the data completely separate, then domains is the way to go. It basically means that it prevents all sharing of any data, policies, clients, content, And you have different user administrators to log in to each domain. We can rename domains. So under our admin page with our domain selected, we can select our current domain and we can do a rename. Notice the domain ID stays the same though. It doesn't matter what name you give it, the domain ID will remain unchanged. Here we can add a domain. So under our add domain task, give it a domain name, and away it goes. Once you've added domains, then the logon will change. When you log on, it will ask you for the domain name. And remember, this is not an Active Directory Windows domain, it is a SEPM domain that it's after here. General client settings and tamper protection. Under our clients page, selecting our group or my company at the top level, we can choose the policies tab on the right hand side and step 3 general settings. This will enable us to go into the settings for that particular policy for that group. We've got tab for restart settings. This enables you to choose when you wish to restart, the restart method. Notice that can be locked down. We have the open padlock there. We've got the delayed restart, and you can specify the start time that you wish that restart to happen. We can select a prompt or restart message that will appear on the endpoint. Under the general settings, we can put the location settings in, as in remember the last location, and it will try and come back to that location when it starts up again. And of course enable location awareness. Under the security settings, we can specify the client password protection. This enables you to lock down the password for maybe importing or exporting policies. So you can't have the local user moving their policies in and out without a password. And you've got security settings to block traffic if you have any security issues that you wish to highlight. And the tamper protection. We can protect the Symantec security software from being tampered with or shut down. And it's a good idea to put tamper protection in operation. You can choose to block and log it or just to log the event only. And you've got the notification message that can be displayed. So, in this lesson, we should have learnt how to describe the communications between the SEPMs and the client, and also learned about managing and configuring groups and tamper protection.